The words stung like a slap across my face, though they were spoken in a hushed tone, as if she thought I couldn't hear. She's a burden, Tom. We can't keep carrying her weight. My daughter-in-law, Emily, stood in the kitchen, her voice sharp with frustration. I was in the next room, my hands trembling as I folded a quilt I'd made decades ago for my son's crib. A burden. The word lodged in my chest, heavy as a stone. At 75, I'd lived through wars, loss, and love, but nothing cut deeper than hearing my own family reduce me to that. My name is Eleanor Grayson, and I've never been one to sit idle. Born in a small town where the winters were long and the summers fleeting, I learned early that life doesn't hand you anything, you carve it out with your own two hands. I raised my son, Tom, alone after my husband passed when Tom was just 6. I worked 2 jobs, stitched clothes by lamplight, and still found time to teach him how to dream big. He was my world, and I thought I was still part of his. But now, living in their guest room, I felt like an intruder in a life I'd helped build. The house was quiet that evening, save for the faint hum of the dishwasher. I sat in the armchair by the window, the quilt draped over my lap, its faded patches a map of memories. Tom and Emily's voices drifted from the kitchen, their argument growing sharper. She's not even trying to help herself, Emily said. She just sits there, taking up space. My fingers tightened around the quilt. I wanted to storm in, to tell her I'd heard every word. But my legs felt rooted to the chair. Was I really a burden? Had I become so small in their eyes? Tom's response was softer, hesitant. She's my mom, Em. She's got nowhere else to go. His words were a defense, but they carried a weight of obligation, not love. I closed my eyes, picturing the boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, trusting I'd make everything right. Now, I was the problem they whispered about behind closed doors. I'd moved in with them 6 months ago, after a fall left me with a fractured hip and a bruised sense of independence. The doctor said I'd recover, but it would take time. Emily had been kind at first, helping me with physical therapy, but her patience wore thin. She was young, in her late 30s, with a career that kept her tethered to her phone and a toddler who demanded every spare moment. I tried to help washing dishes, folding laundry, but my hands weren't as steady as they used to be, and my efforts often led to more work for her. I saw the way her lips pursed when I dropped a plate or left crumbs on the counter. I wasn't blind to her frustration, but I didn't expect to be called a burden. That night, I lay awake in the guest room, the ceiling staring back at me. The word echoed in my mind, gnawing at my pride. I'd survived losing my husband, raised a son single-handedly, and built a life from scraps. I wasn't done yet. If Emily thought I was a weight to be carried, I'd show her I was still a force to be reckoned with. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my resolve hardening like clay in a kiln. I couldn't change Emily's mind with words. She'd already made up her mind about me. But actions could speak louder than her whispered complaints. I shuffled to the kitchen, careful not to wake the house, and pulled out a notebook I'd kept in my suitcase. It was filled with recipes, patterns, and notes from a lifetime of making things with my hands. If I was going to prove my worth, I'd start with what I knew best. I spent the morning baking. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar filled the house as I pulled a tray of apple turnovers from the oven. My hands ached from kneading dough, but the pain was worth it when my grandson, Liam, toddled in, his eyes wide with delight. "Nana, yum," he squealed, reaching for a warm pastry. I smiled, brushing crumbs from his cheek. For a moment, I felt like myself again, capable, needed. Emily appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed. "You didn't have to do this, Eleanor," she said, her tone clipped. "I was going to make breakfast." I met her gaze, steady and unyielding. "I wanted to," I said simply. She didn't reply, but I saw the flicker of surprise in her eyes. It was a start. Over the next few days, I leaned into the things I could do. I mended Liam's torn overalls, stitching tiny stars along the seams to make him giggle. I organized the pantry, labeling jars with my careful handwriting. I even started a small herb garden in the backyard, using seeds I'd saved from my old apartment. Each task was a quiet rebellion against the word burden. I wasn't just taking up space, I was filling it with purpose. But Emily's attitude didn't soften. If anything, my efforts seemed to irritate her more. "You don't need to prove anything," she said one evening, catching me scrubbing the kitchen floor. "You're supposed to be resting." Her words were polite, but her tone carried an edge, like she resented my refusal to fade into the background. I straightened, leaning on the mop for support. "I'm not resting," I said. "I'm living." Tom was caught in the middle, his loyalty torn. I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the way he tried to keep the peace. "Mom, just take it easy, okay?" he said, his voice pleading. But I couldn't. Taking it easy felt like surrendering, and I wasn't ready to do that. One afternoon, while Emily was at work and Tom was out, I found Liam crying in his room, clutching a broken toy truck. "Nana, fix it," he sobbed. I sat with him, my hands steady despite the ache in my joints, and pieced the truck back together with glue and patience. When he hugged me, his small arms tight around my neck, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in months' worth. That's when the idea hit me. If I could fix a toy, maybe I could fix more than that. Maybe I could rebuild the way this family saw me. I started small, taking on projects around the house. I repainted the chipped fence in the backyard, my strokes slow but precise. I sewed new curtains for the living room, choosing a soft blue fabric that caught the light just right. Each task was a step toward proving I wasn't a burden, but a blessing, source of strength they hadn't realized they needed. By the end of the week, the house felt different, warmer. Liam followed me everywhere, his chatter a constant reminder of why I kept going. But Emily remained distant, her smiles forced. I knew it would take more than curtains and apple turnovers to change her mind. I needed something bigger, something that would show her the depth of what I could offer. That's when I remembered the community center down the street. I'd passed it countless times, its bulletin board plastered with flyers for classes and events. Maybe there was a way I could contribute, not just to this house, but to the world beyond it. I wasn't sure what I'd find, but I knew one thing: I wasn't done fighting to be seen. The community center was a squat brick building with a faded sign that read, Hope Haven. I'd walked by it for months without giving it much thought. But that morning, something drew me inside. The air smelled of coffee and old books, and the hum of voices filled the space, people of all ages, laughing, talking, creating. I clutched my worn sweater, feeling out of place but determined. If I was going to prove I wasn't a burden, I needed to do more than fix things at home. I needed to show I could still make a difference. The woman at the front desk, a cheerful retiree named Clara, greeted me with a warm smile. "What brings you here, dear?" she asked, her eyes crinkling. I hesitated, then told her the truth. "I want to be useful," I said. "I'm not as young as I used to be, but I've got plenty left to give." Clara didn't patronize me or question my ability. Instead, she handed me a flyer for a crafting workshop for seniors and children. "We could use someone with experience," she said. "You look like you've got stories to share." That afternoon, I signed up to lead a weekly class, teaching knitting and storytelling. I'd always loved both. Me mother taught me to knit when I was a girl, and I'd spent years weaving tales for Tom at bedtime. The idea of combining them felt like a spark reigniting an old flame. I spent the next few days preparing, digging through my suitcase for yarn and needles, jotting down ideas for stories that would captivate both young and old. For the first time in months, I felt a purpose beyond surviving. Back at home, Emily noticed my absence. "Where have you been going?" she asked one evening, her tone more curious than accusatory. I told her about the community center, about the class I'd be teaching. Her eyebrows rose, but she didn't say much, just nodded and turned back to her phone. I didn't need her approval, but I wanted it. I wanted her to see me as more than a frail old woman taking up space. The first class was a mix of nerves and magic. 8 seniors and 5 children showed up, their eyes bright with curiosity. I started with a simple scarf pattern, guiding gnarled hands and tiny fingers through the loops. Then I told a tale of a woman who wove her dreams into a blanket that warmed an entire village. The room was quiet, save for the click of needles and the occasional gasp from a child. When we finished, a little girl named Sophie hugged me, her small hands clutching the scarf we'd started together. "You're like a fairy godmother," she whispered. My heart swelled. Word of the class spread, and soon, more people joined. I began to recognize faces. Mr. Henderson, who'd lost his wife last year. Little Jamal, whose mother worked late shifts. Mrs. Patel, who brought chai and stories of her childhood in Mumbai. The community center became my sanctuary, a place where I wasn't a burden but a builder of connections. I taught them to knit blankets for the local shelter, each stitch a small act of love. The children's laughter and the seniors' shared memories reminded me of what I'd always known: age didn't diminish your ability to matter. At home, things were still tense. Emily's frustration hadn't faded, though she was less vocal about it. One evening, I overheard her talking to Tom again. "She's out all day now," Emily said, her voice low. "It's like she's trying to prove something." Tom sighed. "Maybe she is. Maybe she needs to." I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding. They didn't understand yet, but I wasn't giving up. I started bringing Liam to the community center, letting him play with the other kids while I taught. He loved it, his giggles echoing as he chased Sophie around the room. One day, he tugged at my sleeve, holding up a lopsided square he'd knitted. "For you, Nana," he said, his eyes shining. I hugged him, tears prickling my eyes. In that moment, I wasn't just his grandmother, I was his teacher, his guide. But the real test came when Emily showed up at the community center unannounced. I was in the middle of a story, my hands moving with the rhythm of the tale, when I saw her in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. The room fell silent, the weight of her presence like a storm cloud. I kept going, my voice steady, telling the story of a woman who turned her pain into strength. When I finished, the group clapped, and Sophie ran to show Emily her scarf. "Miss Eleanor taught me," she said proudly. Emily didn't say anything, but she stayed until the end of the class, watching as I helped Mr. Henderson fix a dropped stitch and laughed with Jamal over a tangled ball of yarn. As we walked home, Liam between us, she finally spoke. You're good at this, she said, her voice softer than usual. They love you. I nodded, my throat tight. I love them too, I said. It wasn't an apology or a plea, was the truth. That night, I lay awake, thinking about the class, about Emily's words. I wasn't naive enough to think one moment would change everything. But it was a crack in the wall between us. I'd shown her a glimpse of what I could do. But I knew the journey was far from over. There was more to prove, not just to Emily, but to myself. The next week, I proposed a bigger project at the community center, a charity event to donate our blankets to the shelter. Clara loved the idea, and soon, we were planning a community-wide gathering. I poured myself into it, organizing volunteers, designing flyers, and even convincing local businesses to donate supplies. My hip ached, and my hands trembled some days. But I didn't stop. This wasn't just about proving a point, it was about building something lasting. As the event drew closer, I noticed small changes at home. Emily started asking about the community center, about the people I'd met. She even offered to help with the flyers. Her graphic design skills turning my rough sketches into something beautiful. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. I began to see the woman behind the frustration, a mother, a wife, someone carrying her own burdens. The charity event was a week away, and I felt a fire I hadn't known in years. I wasn't just Eleanor, the old woman in the guest room. I was Eleanor, the weaver of stories, the builder of community. And I was just getting started. The days leading up to the charity event were a whirlwind of yarn, phone calls, and hope. I woke each morning with a purpose that carried me through the ache in my bones. The community center buzzed with energy, volunteers knitting, children coloring posters, seniors sharing stories over cups of tea. I was at the heart of it, coordinating every detail, from the donation bins to the schedule of performances. It wasn't just about the blankets anymore. It was about showing the world and Emily that I was still a force, not a shadow. At home, the air felt lighter. Emily's sharp edges softened, though she kept her distance. She'd started joining me and Liam for breakfast, asking about the event in a way that felt genuine, not forced. How many blankets do you have now? She asked one morning, pouring coffee. 52, I said, proud of the number. And more coming. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. That's impressive, Eleanor. It was the first time she'd called me by my name in weeks, and it felt like a victory. Tom noticed the change too. He'd always been my quiet supporter, but now he started helping in small ways, driving me to the community center when my hip acted up, carrying boxes of yarn. You're doing something big, Mom, he said one evening, his voice thick with emotion. I squeezed his hand, remembering the boy who used to draw me pictures to hang on the fridge. I'm just doing what I've always done, I said, making things better. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, knitting a final blanketed deep blue one with silver threads woven through, like stars in a night sky. My hands moved slowly, each stitch a prayer for the event to succeed, for Emily to see me. Liam wandered in, rubbing his eyes. Nana, why you up? He asked, climbing into my lap. I wrapped the blanket around us both, telling him a story about a woman who knitted a bridge to connect two lonely towns. He fell asleep against my shoulder, and I held him close, my heart full. The morning of the charity event dawned bright and crisp. Hope Haven was transformed, tables lined with blankets, banners fluttering, and a stage set up for music and stories. People poured in, their faces alight with curiosity and warmth. I wore my best dress, a deep green that reminded me of the forest where I'd played as a child. My silver hair was pinned up, and I stood tall, ignoring the twinge in my hip. This was my moment. The event began with a song from a local choir, their voices filling the room with hope. Then I took the stage, my hands steady as I welcomed everyone. "We're here to give warmth to those who need it," I said, my voice clear. "But more than that, we're here to show that every one of us has something to offer, no matter our age." The crowd clapped, and I saw Clara beaming from the front row. Sophie and Jamal waved their scarves, their smiles brighter than the sun. As the day unfolded, I moved through the crowd, helping volunteers, sharing stories, and handing out blankets. Mr. Henderson told a joke that made everyone laugh, and Mrs. Patel taught the kids a dance from her village. Liam ran around, passing out cookies I'd baked the night before. The shelter's director thanked me with tears in her eyes, saying the blankets would mean the world to those in need. Then I saw Emily. She stood near the back, holding a stack of flyers she'd designed. I hadn't expected her to come. Said she had work, but there she was, watching me. Our eyes met, and for the first time, I didn't see frustration or pity. I saw something else: respect. Maybe. Or understanding. I nodded to her, then turned back to the crowd, my heart pounding with possibility. The highlight of the event was the storytelling session. I stood on the stage, a blanket draped over my shoulders, and told the story of a woman who'd been called a burden, but wove her pain into something beautiful, a tapestry that warmed hearts and built bridges. The room was silent, every eye on me. When I finished, the applause was deafening, and Sophie ran to hug me, her scarf trailing behind her. After the event, as we packed up, Emily approached me. "You did this," she said, gesturing to the room. "All of it." Her voice was quiet, but there was no edge to it. I met her gaze, my own steady. "I had help," I said. "But yes, I did." She looked away, then back at me. "I was wrong about you, Eleanor. I'm sorry." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that lifted the stone from my chest. That night, we sat around the kitchen table: Tom, Emily, Liam, and me. For the first time in months, it felt like a family. Emily asked about the community center, about the people I'd met, and I told her their stories. She listened, really listened, and I saw the woman I'd hoped she could be: kind, curious, human. But I knew this wasn't the end. An apology didn't erase the hurt, and respect didn't mean connection. There was still a distance between us, a gap I wanted to bridge. I decided to invite Emily to the next class, to see if she'd join us, to share in the work I'd found so much meaning in. It was a risk, but I'd taken risks before. I'd built a life from them. The next morning, I left a note on the kitchen counter, inviting Emily to the community center. I didn't know if she'd come, but I felt lighter for trying. As I walked to Hope Haven, Liam's hand in mine, I realized something. I wasn't just proving myself to Emily or Tom. I was proving it to myself. I was still here, still capable, still powerful. The class that day was smaller, but the energy was the same. I taught a new pattern, a heart-shaped one, and told a story about love that endures through hardship. As I spoke, I glanced at the door, hoping. And then, just as I was about to give up, Emily walked in, a hesitant smile on her face. My heart leapt. Emily's presence in the community center felt like a fragile thread, one I didn't want to snap. She sat at the back, her hands folded, watching as I guided the group through the heart-shaped knitting pattern. Sophie and Jamal flanked her, chattering about their projects, and I saw her smile a real one, not the tight-lipped version I'd grown used to. I didn't push her to join in, didn't call attention to her. I just kept teaching, my voice steady, weaving a story about a woman who stitched her broken heart back together, one loop at a time. When the class ended, Emily lingered, helping Sophie wind her yarn. "This place is special," she said, almost to herself. I nodded, my throat tight. "It's the people," I said. "They make it that way." She looked at me, her eyes searching, and for a moment, I thought she might say more. But she just nodded and left with Liam, leaving me with a flicker of hope. Back home, things began to shift. Emily started asking me about my day, not just out of politeness, but with genuine interest. She'd sit with me in the evenings, Liam asleep upstairs, and we'd talk about the community center, about her work, about the pressures she faced. I learned she wasn't just frustrated with me. She was overwhelmed, juggling a demanding job and a toddler while trying to hold her marriage together. I saw her vulnerability, and it made her human, not an adversary. I kept up my work at the community center, pouring my heart into every class. The group had grown, and we started new projects, knitting hats for newborns, scarves for veterans. Each piece was a testament to what we could do together, no matter our age or struggles. I felt stronger, not just physically, but in spirit. My hips still ached, but it didn't define me. I was Eleanor, the storyteller, the teacher, the woman who refused to be invisible. One evening, Emily surprised me. "I want to help with the next event," she said, setting down her phone. "Maybe I could design more flyers, or, I don't know, something." Her offer was tentative, like she wasn't sure it would be welcome. I smiled, my heart swelling. "We'd love that," I said. "You'd be a great addition." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same side. The next event was a knitting marathon, a day-long effort to create as many blankets as possible for a children's hospital. I spent weeks planning, rallying volunteers, and spreading the word. Emily threw herself into it, designing posters that caught everyone's eye and even suggesting we add a bake sale to raise extra funds. She worked late into the night, her laptop glowing as she tweaked designs, and I saw the passion she brought to everything she did. I realized I'd misjudged her, just as she'd misjudged me. The marathon was a triumph. Hope Haven overflowed with people, families, seniors, even teenagers who'd heard about the cause. We knitted until our fingers cramped, laughing and sharing stories. Emily was there, not just helping with logistics, but knitting alongside us. Her hands clumsy but determined. She made a small blanket, her stitches uneven but full of effort. When she finished, she handed it to me, her cheeks flushed. "It's not perfect," she said. I held it up, admiring the bright red yarn. "It's perfect because you made it," I said, and I meant it. That night, we sat together at the community center, surrounded by stacks of blankets. The room was quiet, the last volunteers gone. Emily looked at me, her eyes glistening. "I didn't see you before," she said. "Not really. I thought you were weak. But you're the strongest person I know." Her words hit me like a wave, washing away the hurt of that first overheard conversation. I reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "We're all stronger than we think," I said. "Even you." From that day on, our relationship changed. Emily started joining me at the community center regularly, not just for events, but for classes. She wasn't a natural knitter, but she listened to my stories, laughed with the group, and found her place among us. Tom noticed the difference. His shoulders lighter, his smiles more frequent. Liam thrived, surrounded by love from both of us. The house felt like a home again, not a battleground. But I wasn't done growing. The community center had awakened something in Maya, a hunger to do more, to reach further. I started a mentorship program, pairing seniors with children to share skills and stories. I invited Emily to join, and she did, teaching the kids about design while learning from Mrs. Patel's wisdom and Mr. Henderson's humor. The program grew, and so did our family's bond, stitched together by shared purpose. One afternoon, as we walked home from the community center, Emily stopped me. "I'm sorry for what I said," she said, her voice steady. "About you being a burden. I was wrong, and I'll never forgive myself for making you feel that way." I looked at her, seeing the weight she'd carried, the guilt she'd held onto. "You're forgiven," I said, my voice soft. We both had to learn to see each other. She hugged me, her arms tight, and I felt the last of the distance between us dissolve. The mentorship program became my legacy. It wasn't just about knitting or stories, it was about showing the world that no one is a burden when they're given a chance to shine. I saw it in the children's confidence, in the seniors' pride, in Emily's newfound warmth. I'd started this journey to prove myself, but I'd ended up building something bigger, a community, a family, a purpose. As winter settled over the town, I sat by the window, the quilt from Tom's childhood across my lap. I wasn't the same woman I'd been 6 months ago, and neither was Emily. We'd both learned that strength isn't just in what you do, it's in how you see each other, how you lift each other up. I'd shown her I was powerful, but she'd shown me something too, that even burdens can become blessings when you open your heart. Winter brought a quiet strength to our home. The snow fell softly outside, blanketing the world in silence. But inside, the warmth of our newfound connection glowed. Emily and I had become partners, not just in the community center, but in life. We cooked together, laughed over Liam's antics, and shared stories that bridged the gap between our generations. Tom watched us with a quiet pride, his relief palpable. The word burden had faded from our vocabulary, replaced by words like family and together. The mentorship program flourished, drawing more people each week. I paired Sophie with Mrs. Patel, who taught her to make samosas, and Jamal with Mr. Henderson, who showed him how to carve wooden toys. Emily took on a bigger role, leading workshops on design and helping the kids create posters for our events. She'd found her place, not just in the community, but in my heart. I saw her now as a daughter, not a rival, and she saw me as more than an old woman in her guest room. But life has a way of testing you, even when you think you've found your footing. One morning, as I was setting up for a class, Clara pulled me aside. "The community center's funding is being cut," she said, her face grim. "We might have to scale back or close." The words hit like a punch. Hope Haven was more than a building. It was my lifeline, the place where I'd rediscovered my purpose. Losing it would be like losing a part of myself. I didn't tell Emily or Tom right away. I needed time to process, to figure out a plan. That night, I sat with my notebook, scribbling ideas, fundraisers, grants, anything to keep the center alive. My hands shook, not from age, but from fear. I'd fought so hard to prove I wasn't a burden. But what if I couldn't save this place? What if I failed the people who'd come to rely on me? The next day, I told Emily. She listened, her brow furrowed, then grabbed her laptop. We're not losing this place, she said, her voice fierce. Let's figure this out. For the first time, I saw her as my Aquala woman with her own strength, her own fire. We spent hours brainstorming, calling local businesses, drafting letters to the city council. Emily's design skills shone as she created a campaign to rally support, with posters and social media posts that captured the heart of Hope Haven. The community rallied around us. Mr. Henderson organized a petition, collecting signatures from everyone who'd been touched by the center. Sophie and Jamal went door to door, handing out flyers. Even Liam helped, drawing pictures to include in our letters. I led a fundraising event, a winter fair with crafts, food, and stories. The turnout was bigger than I'd dreamed. Hundreds of people, bundled in coats, their breath visible in the cold air, all there to save the place that had brought us together. Emily stood by my side, her arm linked with mine as we watched the crowd. You built this, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Not just the event, the community. I shook my head. We built it, I said. All of us. She smiled, and I knew she understood. This wasn't about me proving myself anymore. It was about what we could do together. The fair raised enough to keep the center open for another year. But we didn't stop there. Emily and I worked with Clara to apply for grants, and we secured a partnership with a local charity to fund our programs. Hope Haven wasn't just savvy, it was stronger than ever. The mentorship program grew, and we added new classes, from painting to cooking to writing. I watched as people found their voices, their purpose, just as I had. At home, our bond deepened. Emily and I started a new tradition: Sunday dinners where we'd cook together, each bringing a dish from our past. She made her mother's lasagna, and I made my grandmother's cornbread. Tom and Liam joined in, their laughter filling the house. One Sunday, as we sat around the table, Emily raised her glass. To Eleanor, she said, her eyes meeting mine, for showing me what strength looks like. I clinked my glass against hers, my heart full. To us, I said, for learning together. But the greatest moment came quietly, almost unnoticed. One evening, as I was knitting in the living room, Emily sat beside me, her own needles clicking awkwardly. Teach me, she said, her voice soft. I guided her hands, showing her the rhythm of the stitches, just as my mother had taught me. We worked in silence, the only sound the soft click of needles and the crackle of the fire. It wasn't just about knitting, it was about building something lasting, something that would outlive us both. As spring approached, I felt a shift in myself. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. The community center, my family, the people I'd touched, they were proof that age didn't diminish your power, only refined it. I'd shown Emily I wasn't a burden. But more than that, I'd shown myself. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was still here, still weaving, still strong. The mentorship program became a model for other communities, and I was invited to speak at a regional conference. I stood on the stage, my voice steady, telling the story of how a single word, burden, had sparked a journey of rediscovery. I saw Emily in the audience, her eyes shining with pride, and I knew we'd come full circle. The conference was a blur of faces and applause. But what stayed with me was Emily's expression as I spoke. She sat in the front row, Liam on her lap, Her eyes locked on me. I told the crowd about Hope Haven, about the community we'd built, about the power of seeing people for who they are, not what you assume them to be. I didn't mention Emily's words from that painful night, but I felt them in every sentence, a reminder of how far we'd come. When I finished, the room erupted, and Emily was the first to stand, clapping with a fierceness that brought tears to my eyes. Back home, life settled into a rhythm of purpose and connection. The community center thrived, its doors open to anyone who needed a place to belong. Emily and I worked side by side, planning new events, teaching classes, and mentoring others. She'd become my partner in every sense, her creativity complementing my experience. Tom often joined us, his quiet strength a steady anchor. Liam grew, his laughter a constant reminder of why we did this not just for ourselves, but for the future. One spring morning, as we sat in the backyard, Emily handed me a small package. "Open it," she said, her voice nervous. Inside was a photo album, its pages filled with pictures from the community center teaching. Sophie laughing, Mr. Henderson carving, Mrs. Patel dancing. The last page held a letter from Emily, her handwriting neat and deliberate. "Eleanor," it read, "you showed me what it means to be strong, to build, to love. Thank you for being my family." I looked at her, my vision blurring. "Thank you for seeing me," I said, and we hugged, the weight of the past finally gone. The mentorship program expanded, reaching other towns, and I became a voice for seniors, speaking at events and advocating for their value. But the heart of my work was still Hope Haven, where I taught, listened, and loved. I watched Sophie grow into a confident young girl, Jamal into a thoughtful boy, and Liam into a child who knew he was cherished. I saw Mr. Henderson find joy again, Mrs. Patel share her culture, and Emily find her place in a community she'd once overlooked. One evening, as summer bloomed, we held a celebration at the community center to mark the anniversary of the charity event that had changed everything. The room was packed, the air filled with music and laughter. I stood on the stage, a blanket draped over my shoulders, and told a new story, one about a woman who thought she'd lost her strength but found it in the people around her. The crowd listened, their faces a tapestry of hope and connection. Emily joined me on stage, her hand in mine. "This place," she said, her voice clear, "is proof that no one is a burden when they're given a chance to shine." Eleanor taught me that. The applause was thunderous, but all I could hear was her voice. All I could see was her smile. We'd built something together, not just with yarn and stories, but with trust and forgiveness. As the night ended, I stood outside, the stars bright above. Tom wrapped an arm around me, Liam asleep on his shoulder. "You did it, Mom," he said. I shook my head, my eyes on the community center's glowing windows. "We did it," I said. "All of us." The journey hadn't been easy. There were still days when my hip ached, when doubts crept in, when the memory of burden stung. But I'd learned that power isn't in being flawless, it's in showing up, in trying, in loving despite the hurt. I'd shown Emily I was more than she thought. But she'd shown me something too. That family isn't just blood. It's the bonds you choose to weave. Years later, when I looked back, that word, burden, was no longer a wound. It was a spark, the start of a fire that had warmed us all. I'd taken it and turned it into something beautiful, something lasting. I was Eleanor Grayson, and I was powerful not because I had to prove it, but because I'd lived it. The community center stood as a testament to that power. Its doors open, its heart full. And as I sat with Emily, knitting under the summer stars, I knew I'd found my place not just in her home, but in the world. We were no longer just a family. We were a story, woven together, stitch by stitch, heart by heart.